creating and using masks. Now, again, everything that you find in Photoshop, you will find it is all tied together, and selections and masks are tied together in a little bit of a unique way. Right, objectives for today: we're going to be looking at what is a mask. We're going to be identifying two types of mask. We're going to be looking at layer masks in particular, creating a mask from a selection, masking versus erasing, a question that comes up a lot. Why can't I just use the erase tool? Active or inactive masks, really important that you understand that, otherwise you will be slowly destroying your images. We'll have a look at clipping masks. The second type of mask I want to look at is called a clipping mask. And then we're going to go briefly into selector mask, which is for more complex masking. And then we'll have a look at a few examples. I'll take you through a few examples. So let's go. Firstly, what is a mask? Well, a mask is a selection. Strange as it may seem, masks and selections are basically opposite sides of the same coin. They're exactly the same thing. They just look different. Now, when you've spent a long time creating a really complex selection, the last thing you want to do is for your computer to go off or the power to go off or whatever, and you've lost it. So you can actually save your selection, and that's into the select menu and save selection. And then when you come back to that next week, say, then you could bring that selection back. So you're never going to lose it. But how is that saved? How is the selection actually saved? Well, when you click Save Selection, you will get the Save Selection dialog box come up. And there's a few clues in here. We've got to give it a name. So, okay, I'll call it my selection in this particular case. But here it says channel. We're going to give it, it's a new channel. And you can see the operation down here is for new channel. So what actually happens is your selection is actually saved as a channel. And as we know, Photoshop has got 3 channels, the red, the green and the blue channel. But also, you've got a channel that appears when you make a selection. So here I've made a selection and I want to put a little bit of a vignette around the edge of this. So I've made a selection, and as soon as I've saved that selection, this little thing appears, and this is called an alpha channel. And this appears at the bottom of the channels panel. At the channels panel. I always like saying that for some reason, I don't know. The channels panel. And this is then saved with your image. And that's why that this is, because all your channels and all your alpha channels are saved when you save it. You cannot save it as a JPEG. It won't work as a JPEG. You have to save your image as a PSD or a TIFF file. And then it will save all the channels. So you'll be able to get access to all these next week or next year or whenever you decide to come back to this project. So basically a mask is a selection. Now, layer masks. Well, these and clipping masks, these are the 2 masks that I want to look a little bit more in detail at, because they are both extremely useful. Now, first, layer masks. Well, these obviously have a place on the layer. And here you can see that I've got a layer in the layers panel, and I've put a mask on. And we'll be going into how to put the masks on in a minute. But I've put a white mask is called a reveal all mask. And what this does is it reveals all the pixels that are on the image that's connected to it. So here we can see all this image of the beautiful Elsica Reservoir. But on this mask, I've actually painted with black. And when I've painted with black, you can see what happens is you can see straight through it. It cuts right through to transparency. Here I've painted a little square with 50% grey. And you can see that here now I've got 50% opacity. It's not completely opaque, but you can see some of the detail through it. So dependent on what opacity of grey that you paint with, you'll get a different amount of opacity showing through. So here I can't paint a white square on top of white. So it's just the same colour as everything. So this white square, you can just see the detail that's on the actual layer itself. So that's a layer mask. And a white one is called a reveal all mask, and a black one is called a hide all mask. Because these black pixels that we've put on the mask here, they are hiding. So basically they're hiding these pixels so I can see through to what's underneath. Moving on. Oh, and you can see here that in the layers, in the channels panel, here we've got the alpha channel that's got a black square on it and a grey square on it, which is exactly the same as your mask here. The second type of mask is a clipping mask. What happens is it actually, Photoshop uses one layer to determine what the transparency is on another layer. And we can see here that we've got a layer and we've got some text underneath it. And this little doohickey here, this little bent arrow, this is the symbol for a clipping mask. And what actually happens is that what Photoshop's saying is, I will only show you something on this top layer if there's something on the bottom layer underneath it. Well, in the bottom layer, all we've got is some pixels where the text is. And so that automatically creates a mask for you. And the great thing about this is it's a live effect. So that what you can do is, if you get the move tool, you can actually click inside the text and you can move that back image up and down or around. So if you didn't quite get it in the right place, you can actually move it up and down to create an effect. And then you can start building effects around the outside of it. Now, adding a layer mask manually, down at the bottom of the layers panel, there's a series of icons, and one of them, so one of my students said it looked like a washing machine. So I always just refer to that now in my class as the washing machine icon, but that's the mask, that's add your layer mask icon, or the washing machine icon. Right. Now, to add a layer mask, you go to the bottom of the layers panel and add one. Or if you're a menu freak, you can go to the layer menu and down to layer mask. And that lets you either put a reveal all mask on, which is going to be white, or a hide all mask on, which is going to be black. Now we can create a layer mask from a selection. So here I've got my layer open again, and I've just created a square selection. And now when I click on the add a mask icon, what it'll do is Photoshop automatically knows that the middle bit is the bit you want to keep. And so as soon as I click with a selection live, it will create that selection and create that transparency for me. So everywhere that's black, it's automatically filled it in Photoshop, will be transparent. Anywhere that's white in the middle, we'll see what's on that layer. Now, why can't I just use erase? Well, you can. No reason why not. It's quite valid to use erase, and sometimes you have to. But there's many times, if you want to work non-destructively, you don't need to. An erase cuts a hole in your image. It's destructive. So if you cut a hole in your image and save it, when you open it up again, you've got an image with a hole in. Now, masking is non-destructive and reversible. What it actually does is it just makes the pixels invisible, and then you can reverse it and make them visible again. And you can do this by just painting with black or with white onto the mask. And they said the pixels are rendered invisible or visible, depending on what colour you paint. Now here you can see I've put a mask on and I've selected my paintbrush and I've got black as my foreground colour. And you can do that quickly just by, if they're not the right way around, you can press the D key and that will on the keyboard, and that will reset to black and white or white and black. And then the X key to toggle them round. But by hook or by crook, you need to get black as your foreground colour. And then when you start painting, you'll see you're actually painting onto the mask. And that's, again, showing through the mask, and that there's nothing underneath it, so it's just showing through to transparency. Now, the great thing about this is that the week after, when you open this file up again, and somebody says, well, you spelt my name wrong, then all you've got to do is swap round your foreground and your background colour. So now you're going to paint with white, with a paintbrush, and as you paint with white, it'll make those pixels reappear, because they've never disappeared, they've never been disposed of like with erase. They're still there. All we need to do is just make them visible again. And you can see what it's happening on the mask is happening exactly the same on the image itself. So wherever there's white, you see the image. Wherever there's black, you see through. Now, important thing, whether the mask is active or not active. Now, here you've got the mask itself, and when you click on it, you'll get this like a double line around the outside. And this means that that mask is active, so that when you're painting with black and white on it, you're actually masking. If you've got this, then the image is active. And so if you start painting with black now, or white, you're actually painting with paint on your image. So you'll be ruining it. So it's just a thing, it happens all the time. You've just got to have a quick look before you start masking, and you go, oh, now, my mask's not active. Just click on it, so you get that little double line that goes all the way around the outside. Now, a clipping mask, this uses a layer to determine the transparency of another layer. So I say here, I've got a text layer above my background layer. And I've got a padlock on. Now I need to get rid of that padlock because this layer needs to go underneath. The text layer wants to go underneath the background. So once I've got rid of that layer, I can drag this layer underneath. So now I've got my text layer underneath me layer note. Now I can't see anything because it's underneath. But now I'm going to create a clipping mask. I'm going to clip these together so that I will then only see something on this top layer if there's pixels exist on the layer underneath it. So how do I create a clipping mask? Well, we can go to the layer menu and down to create clipping mask. And there's a cute little keyboard shortcut there of Alt, Control and G. And as soon as I've done that, I get the clipping mask symbol appear. And what this does now, it looks at what's in the bottom and says, well, that's where I'm seeing through. And everything else is going to be masked out. So there's transparency everywhere. There are no pixels on the text layer. Now, this is a text layer, so technically it is a vector layer, but it does have to have infill pixels so we can see where it is. So it is totally scalable. It is a vector, but it does have pixels in it so we can actually see where it lies. And like I said, this is a live effect. You can click and drag up and down with it, so your heart's content to actually move that image within the text, which is quite cool, actually. Now, select subject. This came in, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 versions ago. To complement select and mask, and it was there. It's been put there to try and making that initial selection easier for you before you take it into select and mask. But you only see it. It only appears if you've got the quick selection or the magic wand tool open. So if you've not got them open, then there's a good chance you've probably never seen that. And the select subject is there for basically a one-click fix. It does its best to find the main subject matter with one click, and then you go straight into select and mask with it. Now here you can see that one click and it selects the car. It's not always massively accurate. Here there's some little bits underneath, because there's no contrast under there, or very little, it's missed it. So what you've got to do is use another selection tool just to quickly get the bits in or get the bits out that you need. If there's plenty of contrast, it does. You can see this, it's probably got what, 80% of it done. One click, done. All I've done is I've just got another tool and gone, I think my lasso tool, lassoed round there, subtract from selection, and we're good to go. So it's really just to give you a good start. And if you've got plenty of contrast, it really does speed up your workflow, it will. Now, select and mask. For more complex selections, such as like hair and fur and things like that, that we've got select and mask. So we make the initial selection and then we take it into select and mask. And this is the button that we click. And what this opens up now, it's not a dialog box anymore. It used to be called Refine Edge. It's now been rebranded as Select and Mask. But Adobe have now defined what they call task spaces. And a task space fills all the Photoshop interface. And what they're saying is we don't want you to be baffled or confused by things that's going off around you. So this fills the whole space on your screen. And what they've done is they've brought the relevant tools into the task space. So here we've got a selection tool, we've got a hair selection brush, we've got just a painting brush, selection tools, a hand tool, and a zoom tool. And then over this side, we've loads of sliders. We can get feather, we can do a bit of contrast, we can contract the edge. They've brought all the things that you need to make this really, really good selection. And it's fabulous for like hair and fur and things that traditionally were doable, but they were pretty hard to do. And we'll just look at now what we need to do. If we want to create a mask or mask anything out of this, then let me keep sneaking over my layers panel. That we've got as background layer, but if I want to put a mask on this, then I'll click to get rid of the back to get rid of that padlock. And then if I go down to the bottom of the layers panel, I can click and I can put a reveal all mask on. That's what happens by default. And this reveal all mask shows everything that is on the actual image itself. If I now go and get black as my foreground colour, and I'll get my paintbrush, make it a bit bigger, and then wherever I paint, I'm just cutting through that mask to transparency underneath. Or if I had another image underneath, you'd see the image underneath. And this is what we're going towards, that we want part of this image to blend in with part of the image underneath. If we have a softer brush, we can do a bit more blending. So I'll have a really soft brush. And this time I can create a soft, so I can create more of a blend with what's going off on the layer underneath. And if I paint with, let's say, 50%, so if I go on, like I said, 50% grey, something like that, then I'll get a version of opacity. It's not quite as, well, this is 100%, this is 50%. If I go down to 25%, so you can define yourself, depending on what grey that you use, what opacity that you want on this mask. A little thing that I found was that masking can actually be used for some quite unusual little things. And this is an FYI that I thought you might find useful. And this is how to get rid of halo pixels. Now, in this image here, I say, well, I want to do something with my spaceman, so I want to get rid of all the sky. So probably let's have a look at, let's say, the Magic Wand tool. I'll leave the tolerance set to 30, and contiguous and tolerance. I mentioned it in the selections, but because we're actually making a selection now, that tolerance is the range that it's going to select in the colours, because this is a colour selection tool or a tone selection tool. So the whole range of these colours is very similar. So if I just say, okay, I'm going to go plus 30 and minus 30 on the tolerance, and when I click, it'll select all the blue for me in one go. And it's even got between his legs and between this little bit here. And that's because I haven't had contiguous ticked. If I have contiguous ticked, the selection won't cross any boundaries, so it'll stop here and it'll stop here. So it won't go into this area. So if I now click, you'll see it'll go to there, and then contiguous says, right, is the next pixel next blue pixel connected onto this one? Oh, well, no, it's over here. Well, it says, well, you can't connect to it then. So if you find that you're getting things that are not selecting, just check that your contiguous isn't ticked. And then when I click on that, it selects it all. Now, once I've got my selection, it's a selection of the sky, and that's what I want to get rid of. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel, and I'm going to put a mask on. And of course, it's the opposite way around. So what I need to do is invert it with Control and I, and I've just inverted the mask now from white and black to black and white. And you can see here the problem that happens a lot because of the anti-aliasing, that you get a load of halo pixels. You get things that run in all the way around the outside, and there can be a bit of a bugger to get rid of. And this method I found works really well. And it actually uses the mask. So I need to make sure that my mask is active. So I've clicked on it. And then I'm going to get another selection tool, which doesn't matter which, but I'll use my lasso tool. And I'll just draw a little bit round and down and back to start again. So I've now defined an area on that mask. I'm now going to put a little bit of blur on it. So I'm going to go to filter and blur and Gaussian blur. I don't want that much. I only want, say, 1 pixel, just to soften that edge a little bit. Now let's have a look. I'll just zoom in a bit. If I go and get my levels, and a levels is a contrast adjuster. If I pull my black slider now towards the white one, you'll see all them pixels magically disappear. Now I think that's pretty amazing, and I actually use that a lot. I love it. And what's actually happening is we've defined in here the edge of the mask, and it's quite soft. But as I pull the black slider towards the white slider, I'm increasing the black. And what's happening is that it's pushing that black soft edge towards my spaceman all the way around him. And so any halo pixels just disappear. They're still there, but they're now under this mask, so I can't see them. Oh, we've missed his NASA thing off there. Oh, right, okay. Well, let me go and okay with that. If I show you the mask on that, you can see that I've got a black hole here. And so all I need to do is to fill that with white to bring that back. And this is the beauty of masks, that nothing's ever deleted. So if I go and put white as my foreground colour, I'll get my paintbrush and I'll just paint it over. And then when I come back to there, you see I've unmasked that bit. Now I think that's pretty cool. I like that. And you can set that up, and once you've done it a couple of times, you'll get really quick at it, and it's a really nice way of getting a nice organic edge to your selections. Right, now selected mask. Let's have a look at that. Now selected mask is when you've already made a selection, and you could make that selection with the select object and all that, but it doesn't matter how you make the selection. So what I'll do, I'll just use, let's say because I know there's a lot of contrast here, because this is on a white background, which is why a lot of, well, most of the model shots are done on a grey or a white background, so you can cut them out easy. But there's bits which don't cut out that easy, because Photoshop, when it's trying to find an edge, it looks for contrast. And on this edge here, there's a lot of contrast. So it only needs a little bit at each side to be able to find that edge, because what Photoshop does is it searches in between. So if you've got, and this is called the radius, so if you've got a radius of 2 pixels, you've got a pixel at this side and a pixel at that side, and Photoshop searches in there for the edge, and it finds it dead easy. So if I will use, let's say, the quick selection tool, use the quick selection tool, and we'll try and make a selection. Oh, missed a bit there. And we'll try and take that out in here. Now that's all right. Now you can see that round the edges of the arms and the claws and everything, it's done a brilliant job, really quick. But the hair looks a bit ratty. And this is because in previous versions of Photoshop, we only had 1 radius. So we'd have 1 pixel radius round the whole thing. So this bit would always look good, but the hair would look absolute rubbish. Well, now we can actually extend the radius in areas where there's hair to try and make it look better. So let's go into select and mask with this now. I've got a selection live. So we'll go into select and mask. And here you can see all the sliders. There's several views. You can view marching ants and overlay on black on white to check whether you've got a good selection or not. If I've got something underneath it, I do like to use on layers, because then I can see what's going off underneath. Now you can see here, it's not done a fabulous job around here. So what I can try and do is say, okay, I'm going to use a smart radius for the hair. Now a smart radius means it's going to let me paint in a bigger radius around the hair. And in that bigger radius, Photoshop's going to look for contrast. It's going to look for the hair. But for these bits around the outside, what I can do is I can shift the edge. So if I shift that edge in, you'll see that it'll take off them. So I can shift the edge out, in which case that will get bigger. But what I'm doing is I'm contracting that selection now with a slider. So that's not bad. I'll probably leave it there. Maybe smooth the selection a little bit. But now I want a radius. Now this is a smart radius. Now you see if I pull it right over the other side, you see it goes a bit soft, and we do get breakthrough happening like here. So we normally need, I don't know, 5–10 pixels, something like that. And then we're going to get this brush, and this is what I call the wispy edge brush. This is the fine edge brush for looking for hair. And I'm going to get a brush, something like that. And what you'll see is that when I click, I mean, there's some members of my class here, and I've deemed this scuffing. This is called scuffing. We're not painting, but if you see, when I click, all round the hair will get readjusted, because it's adding that radius. So if I click in there, that gets rid of that little bit, and then I'm going to just scuff over here. So I'm just scuffing over them bits. Now you'll see that there is still some residual stuff. And this is because quite a lot of the hair is out of focus. It's out of the depth of field. It's basically out of depth of field. And so Photoshop's not really sure whether it's a hair or not. And so you end up with quite a lot of these edge pixels left. We have another go at that. Take the radius down a little bit. That's better. So now, but you can still see, let me just zoom in a little bit, that there's some edge pixels. And these are the bits that Photoshop, it's not right sure. And so you end up getting these halo pixels coming through. And what they've given us to help with that is a halo removal tool. And this is called, in the output settings, this is called decontaminate colors. And what this does, Photoshop, and when we tick that, Photoshop examines each of these hairs. And if there's pixels around the outside of it that are a different color, it fills them with the same color as hair. So if you just watch this, I'll zoom in a bit because sometimes it can be quite dramatic. So here you can see we've got a much better, but still a bit ropey selection. But if I click decontaminate colors, boom. And then I've got an amount that I can drop it off a little bit if it's too much. You don't normally take it too far, but I'll just drop it down a little bit. And you can see that is not a bad selection for hair. And before refine edge and before select and mask, this was a channels job. And you had to be really competent with Photoshop to be able to do it correctly. Whereas now, beginners can get really excellent results with just pulling a couple of sliders. And then you can output it to layer mask, new layer with a layer mask. I tend to use the layer with a layer mask all the time. But you can output it yourself. And what it does is it creates another layer, puts the layer mask on it, and then it switches off the layer, just leaves you it as a backup. When I've got both of them, I don't need that. So I'll basically just drag it and drop it in the bin. But that is basically the old refine edge select and mask. That really is cool for doing amazing selections with hair and fur and trees and such like.